This is the CNC Geekcast, the podcast where two guys with speech impediments talk about movies. I'm Joseph Collins.
And I'm Paul Combs.
And on today's episode, we'll be talking about the 1999 version, The Mummy. Not the recent one, because, to be honest, we care nothing about it. We're going to be talking about what makes this movie so good, the characters, the plot, and anything else that comes to mind. So stay tuned!
Okay, I'm going to start off with a simple question.
Okay.
Does this movie hold up after almost 20 years?
Yes, it does. Just like Star Wars, just like some of the Star Trek movies, and just like Indiana Jones, Back to the Future. Something about this movie just does live on like those other movies do.
It does. What was it about the new movie, the new Mummy, that made you just not interested in it?
Well, I was interested in seeing how they were going to expand this monster universe. That was my interest, but then when I heard the reviews coming in, I'm like, okay, no, I'm not interested in giving that much money to this movie.
Yeah, that was always my thing too, because part of what makes 1999's The Mummy so much fun is that it is an action-adventure movie. It's fun. Brendan Fraser is kind of in over his head. He is. And the new one is just Tom Cruise. It looks like a lot of Tom Cruise's greatest hits. I haven't read any of the reviews. I just wasn't interested. So that's why we decided to talk about this movie instead, because this movie's still fun.
No, it is fun. After 18 years, and like you said, Brendan Fraser is in over his head, but he's also competent.
Yeah,
and he's I love that. And there's other couple of scenes where there's one scene where he's like in a gunfight and those bullets coming at him against the wall. And he just stands there reloading, and I'm like, he doesn't pay attention. I'm like, that desensitized by it. Wow.
Yeah, I thought that was funny too, because it's on the boat. It's played for laughs. When they're shooting, and you see the holes in the wall.
Yeah.
And she pulls him to the side.
And he realizes like, oh, okay.
Yeah, like, I probably should have moved.
Yes, I was close.
Because the comedy in the movie is actually natural. Those funny scenes, there's the funny scenes with Benny, who's actually kind of great.
Now, Benny is great comedic-wise. I mean, his performance and deliveries was perfect for his type of character.
No, it was. Hey, O'Connell, you're on the wrong side of the river. Oh, you forgot your horses.
No, the line is, looks like I have all the horses. And then Brendan Fraser's like, Benny, looks like you're on the wrong side of the river.
I knew it was something like that. That's one of my favorite lines from the film.
Yeah. I just love the interaction, because there's another scene where Fraser said, you came back from the desert with a new friend, didn't you, Benny? He just abuses the guy, and he kind of deserves it.
And I think the movie does a very good job setting up their dynamic. Because again, it comes down to the humor aspect. The humor is fun because the leading officer, runs away. And Benny's like, well, looks like you got promoted.
And then Brendan's face is like, are you with me, Benny? And then Benny's like, oh, until the end. And then he starts running away. And that small moment between those two characters set up the comedy of this movie.
It does, and it sets up their dynamic. The fact that they are going to have an antagonistic relationship with the rest of the movie. And they really do. Another great character though is Rachel Weisz.
I do agree with that.
She's introduced so greatly.
Oh, yes.
Because it just kind of illustrates her character. She's very smart, incredibly competent, but she's also clumsy and doesn't have a whole lot of common sense.
It feels like she has confidence in the realm of her knowledge, but not in the realm of action. You know, because it does a really good job of showing that just because you're confident in one thing doesn't mean you're confident in something else. And I also love the character, because at one point you could tell that when she says she was clumsy, and the movie illustrates this by showing that she was organizing books in a library, and she's on a ladder, and she finds a book that's not supposed to be in the pile, and she's like, oh, this you don't belong in this section, and she looks over to the left and sees that it's on the shelf across from her, so she tries to reach over it, but she's not long enough to do it, and pulls the ladder forward, and now she's on the ladder balancing out. She falls forward, hits the bookcase, all the bookcases are in a circle, so you have this domino effect.
Which seems like a really bad way to set up a library.
And that's the boss's fault.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. I was like, who would set up a library like that?
Yeah, me too, when I saw it. I'm like, I think there's a reason why they do it the way they do it.
Yeah,
like in real life.
Yeah, well, that doesn't happen.
Exactly. But I love how the boss of the library comes in and starts saying, why do I put up with you? And this is what she's like, well, because I'm smart, I read ancient Egyptian, and you could tell that she was listing it off, and she was trying to be strong. And that's the thing I like about that, because it goes to the show that she's confident in her knowledge, but maybe socially awkward in it, and like that's human.
She's a very human character. Because this movie kind of did the whole damsel in distress thing.
Nah,
she was only created to be a damsel in distress. And this movie did a very good job making her own competent character. Because she even saves the day at certain points.
Well, she also is useful. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, because that's one of the main... I actually did read some reviews of the new Mummy movie, and that's one of the main... Or saw a review. And that's one of the main objections with the new woman character in the new Mummy. She was just useless in that movie.
A damsel in distress?
Exactly. There's no reason for her to be there. In this movie, there's a reason for Rice to be here, because when you have a crew, when you have a team of archaeologists, in Indiana Jones is the brains and the muscle. It's his adventure, and, you know, everybody else comes along for the ride. In this, those responsibilities are distributed across the team. It's a team effort in this case. Brendan Fraser's the muscle. He's also the one who gets, you know, he's a leader, the one that does all the tough stuff. Well, Rice's character is the archaeology. She's the brains of the operation. So she's the one who does all the digging, all the smart things. Because there was one point where they were digging down into the tomb, and they were messing with some mirrors. And Brendan Fraser's like, what's going on here? And she said, well, it's an ancient Egyptian trick to get light, and I'll show you in a minute. So she knows all this archaeology stuff. She knows how to read the archaeology. She knows the ins and outs of how the tombs were constructed. She was able to identify that the mummy scratched in the inside, and who knew Anubis. So she was book smart in this movie. So she was really useful. If it wasn't for her, they would not be able to get into the dig.
Well, I thought it was great, too, how they explained, like, hey, why would Rachel Weisz, this fantastic librarian, this fantastic archaeologist, want to go out there? Mm-hmm. Well, she's trying to get in this group of scholars. I can't remember the actual name of the group, but they are this very esteemed group of scholars. Mm-hmm. And she is denied because she doesn't have enough field experience.
Yeah.
Then along comes her brother at the perfect time.
Giving her a key.
Yeah, who gives her the key, and it's like, hey, you know that city of treasure and that awesome city?
This key has a map that just shows this leads to the city of the dead, which is supposed to be an ancient...
Yeah, so it ties in perfectly. It's natural, the reason she would want to do this. It doesn't feel forced.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel forced for her to run into Brendan Fraser.
Yeah, and that's another thing I like about this movie is how well set up it is. Because in the beginning of the film, after the mummy gets mummified and...
Gets cursed, and I'm going to put that in quotes.
Yeah,
because...
we're going to talk about that later on. You have the opening scene between him and Benny, and they were at the City of the Dead. That's the thing. And they were the only two survivors of the film, so the beginning had a purpose. It seems like, you know, and this is another thing that makes this film so good, is that it's screenwriting, again, 101. Well, every scene does have, not every, but the opening shots do have a purpose. And they are there to establish something. Brendan Fraser's character has been there before. So he's the guide that, you know, Walsh wanted when they discovered the map. And now I know that what's Walsh's motivation. What was Brendan Fraser's motivation again?
Money.
Money. Okay, well that makes sense.
Yeah, it's the Hamunaptra, the City of the Dead, but it's also the city of Pharaoh's riches.
Yeah, which I thought about that was just funny because in the beginning of the prologue where we saw King or the Pharaoh's wife having an affair with the mummy. Of course, she kills herself, and, you know, the mummy's like, I'll find you, and I'll bring you back to life. The narrator's like, so he took the body and went all the way to the City of the Dead. Well, the pharaohs kept all the wealth. And I'm like, oh, so it's one big bank.
Yeah, basically. they keep the... It's a morgue / bank.
It is. I was like, that's funny. This is a funny thought I had.
That is a funny thought. Not two things I would really combine.
No, it's not.
Like, hey, drop your dead people off for burial, and also deposit your money.
Exactly. It's like, here's a checking account. It's like, you know, would you anything else we can do for you, sir? No, I'm good, thank you. But no, I mean, what about the brother's character in this?
He was there for more comic relief, but he sold it. Everyone in this movie was cast so well.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Like they don't feel natural. It feels like they picked these people out.
Yeah, but the other thing I liked about this film is that even though that there's a lot of death in this movie, a lot of people died, every character served a purpose for the plot. And that's what I liked about it. You had the jailer who did die, but he served a purpose because he was the jailer. Without him holding Fraser's character, Weisz would not be able to meet him. And, you know, without them negotiating, was another thing I liked about that scene was when Weisz negotiated his freedom by bargaining with this jailer. Yes.
Interesting thing about that scene with her negotiating that freedom.
Okay.
You know, Brendan Fraser's hanging there by the neck, choking, dying.
Yeah.
He almost actually died doing that scene.
You mean they actually had him hanging in that scene?
They actually had him hanging in that scene.
Oh, wow.
It was like, I guess it was a stunt gone wrong. I don't know what happened. But there's a part where his eyes roll back in his head. Brendan Fraser's eyes actually rolled back into his head due to lack of oxygen.
Not because of acting.
Not because of acting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's funny. And the director's like, that's a great take. Then do it again. Fraser?
What was interesting, because he didn't have a lot of star power at the moment.
Yeah.
He really couldn't stop production. It was like, well, that sucks for you.
No,
on to the next scene.
Oh, poor Fraser. But he got his paycheck. This is nice.
Yeah.
But no, I do love that scene because she did. It also once again showed her brain smart by being able to negotiate. But again, you go back to the jailer. So he had a purpose in the film, which was helping him free.
And also to die horrifically.
Yes.
Because he has one of the most horrific death scenes in the movie.
Yeah, and that's another thing that I like about this film is that even though I don't like seeing people suffer and die on screen, it just goes to it does ramp up the tension. He does have a couple of comedic scenes, the jailer does, where he gets food or he fools himself. And I love that scene where Fraser's character, the ship was attacked and it's burning, and he's like, the jailer's like, what do I do? What's going to happen? And Brendan says, I'll be right back, and then jumps over the boat.
Yeah.
And then the jailer's like, oh. I know that thing is funny. It does serve a purpose because it shows how terrible these beetles are, how dangerous they are, and what exactly they do. They go after the brain in that scene. It went into his body, crawled up his body, and you could see the figure under the skin, go out of the brain and start eating it.
Yeah, trust me, I remember that scene. Like, I first saw this movie at 14. Mm-hmm. Interesting thing about this movie, it was the first movie I ever actually saw by myself.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, my mom dropped me off at the theater, and then she picked me up when the movie was done. It was this big deal. It was really cool.
No, yeah.
But those beetles have always stuck with me. Like, seeing it crawl under the dude's skin and start eating his brain, it's terrifying.
And you could tell when he died, you could tell he was going crazy because his brain was getting eaten. Like, it was a terrible scene. Not terrible, but horrific death. But at the same time, it also goes back to the Americans in this movie. The Americans also had a purpose, and they were to help the mummy regain his full strength. So every single character in this movie did have a purpose. And the thing I like about this film is once that purpose was fulfilled, they just killed off the characters.
So interesting thing, like the American I remember the most is the guy with the glasses, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Because I wear glasses.
Yeah.
So when the mummy took his eyes, wouldn't the mummy have also got bad vision?
That's a good point. I don't know. I mean, we talked about this. I don't know if he did or not. That's what I thought about when I watched this movie. I'm like, wait a minute. Knowing that I have bad vision, because I wear glasses as well, I'm like, wouldn't the mummy have bad vision? It's like, man, that'd be kind of funny if you saw the mummy trying to be all terrified and he's like putting on glasses. It's like, I can't read the text.
Yeah, it was just one of those things I was thinking about watching it because I have bad vision as well. Mm-hmm. And it was also bad because I was watching him and he fell and he lost his glasses.
I'm like, oh, and no one came back from him. That's the thing. I mean, he's like, where's my glasses? And then you hear the crash, like, oh, no.
That would just be the worst, though, because...
It was the 1920s, and those things are 19-teens, and those are things, I'm assuming those things are not...
Those things were probably a lot more expensive then than they are now.
Well, facing the economy, back then they were expensive for the time.
Yeah.
Sure. All these characters had a purpose to serve in the movie, but what did you think of the mummy in general?
The mummy was great. Not too familiar with the actor. He doesn't appear to have been in much since then, but he has this commanding presence when he's on screen.
Yeah.
Like, he just appears, draws your eye, and he looks powerful.
Yeah, and that's the thing I also like about this movie is that there's a lot, like I said, it really is tenseful. It really is scary. And that's what I liked about the opening scene where they were in the city of the dead and you had all these wind blowing it. It's just setting up the theme of it. And once the mummy comes to life, there's a lot of scary. I mean, it does a really good job of amping up the tension. I want to call it a horror movie, but it did have that soft horror that still creeped you out in some parts.
It really did. It did a good job blending all the genres. It was definitely a fun movie. Mm-hmm. It was action movie, an adventure movie, even a horror movie in some scenes. Mm. It did a good job blending all of them into just a fun movie.
Yeah, and also some romance that's been thrown into it.
Yeah, and actually, the romance actually felt natural.
It did.
We all knew it was coming, but it didn't feel as forced as it does in some movies.
Well, I think one of the reasons is because when the doctor's character, her name escapes me right now.
Rachel Weisz.
Rachel Weisz's character saw Brendan Fraser in the jail cell. Brendan Fraser's character, long hair, scruff. But when he had a chance to clean up, you could see her reaction just by looking at her. And you could tell by looking at him and her, it's like, oh, that makes sense. He looks like a nice guy. She's attracted. And I love that moment where she asked Ben Fraser, why did you kiss me back in the jail cell? And he's like, I don't know, it seemed like a good idea at the time.
Which is appropriately a good answer. What'd you think of the plot of the film?
Interesting or not, it's like, this movie is so cheesy and knows exactly what it is. It actually explains to us what the plot is. When Ben Fraser talks to his a friend who's a pilot, it's like, the pilot asks, what were you doing? And he's like, save the girl, save the world, that kind of stuff. It explains the last half of the movie.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that too. I mean, you knew it, but the movie was like, well, we're just going to tell the audience what we're going to do.
Exactly, I love it. But this, actually, the plot is simplistic, just like, a lot of these type of movies are. But like you said, this isn't a save the world movie like the Marvel ones are.
It isn't. I kind of like that, because the movie doesn't really explain it. But what would have happened had the mummy been able to bring back to life his girlfriend?
I don't really know, to be honest. I mean, were they ruled the earth? I mean, didn't they say they would rule the earth? It's something about casting down darkness or something upon the earth.
Yeah, I don't know. That's not really... I don't know. That's not really explained. So the movie's more simple. The movie's more about, like, stopping him and protecting Rachel Weisz and protecting the Americans to stop the death. It doesn't really feel like saving the world. It feels more like saving my friends.
Exactly. But there's one thing that bothers me about this movie, and that's the curse. Okay, I get this. Alright, back in the Egyptian time, Mummy did something terrible, defiled the Pharaoh's wife, so he got the worst death possible, buried alive. I can understand the mortality aspect of it. It's like, why would you give this guy immortality? But what I don't understand is, why in the world would you give him superpowers?
I've always wondered that watching this film. Like, I can understand the immortality aspect as well. Because they want him to experience the worst torture imaginable.
For the rest of his life.
For the rest of eternity. The beetles are eating on him. That's the reason he's still juicy, is because he's been feeding the beetles for thousands of years.
Yeah, but when they found that chest with the girlfriend's organs in it, they read that, whoever, the mission is like, the curse is laid upon this mummy to come back to life and to, fulfill the curse. I'm like, why would you put that curse on? Why would you have a curse where this guy brings the 10 plagues of Egypt?
Why would you have a curse where this dude could control sand?
Exactly. Don't get me wrong, it's a cool scene, but I don't understand these ancient Egyptian people. In this movie, at least.
Yeah, I don't either. I've always wondered that watching this film. Just seems like a bad idea. Like, if I ever curse you, if I ever kill you and curse you, I'm probably not going to give you superpowers.
Oh, come on, man. I've always wanted those things.
But just all these things were...
I mean, it was just a good constructed movie.
It was definitely a well-constructed movie. It was. Didn't feel like it had too high of stakes. The stakes felt real. The character was great. The plot was simple. Like, a lot of times when people say the plot is simple, you turn your brain off, they use that as a negative. I really don't think of it that way in movies like this. It just gives more time to focus on the characters and their interactions when you're not thinking about what's going to happen next or worrying too much about what's going to happen next. You just turn your brain off and you watch the movie.
Yeah, like I said, this is one of the things that make this movie good or make Star Wars so good. Because you look at Star Wars, the plot's simple though too. Get the plans, back to Yavin 4. That's it. That's the plot. But what makes the movie fun is the adventure and watching the characters grow with one another and interact with one another and seeing them play off one another and seeing the characteristics and just seeing them go on this adventure. And the same thing with Indiana Jones. It's a simplistic plot too. Beat the Nazis to the Ark. That's it. So simplistic. That's okay because, like I said, it focused on the characters. We saw them grow. We saw the romance. We saw the interaction. And that's, I think, was one of the things that makes this movie so good. We cared about the characters. We wanted them to win. We wanted them to survive. And we wanted them to save the day. And with all this said, what do you think of the climax of the film?
Well, I actually really enjoyed it. Because everybody served a purpose. Everybody helped. Even the brother, who was kind of a useless character through a lot of the movie, other than initially finding the key...
And being comedic relief.
And being comedy relief. He was actually able to stop the guards and kill Anak Sunaman.
And that's the other thing I like about the doctor's character in this one, is that it got to a point where, yeah, she got captured. Even Brendan Fraser said, we're going to save the girl. So you look like, oh, great, another damsel in the stress situation. But really, in the end, she helped.
Yeah, she helped a lot because she was translating the passage while chained to the table.
Yeah, I mean, she was the only one who could do that. So even though she was chained, she was helping out verbally. She wasn't standing there just watching as a spectator. So without her, she would never be able to help the brother read out the hieroglyphics and cause that chariot to come in and steal the soul from the mummy.
Yeah.
So I thought that it just did a great, like I said, it did a great job of distributing the responsibilities. It was a team effort, and that's another thing I think made this movie so good. Just like Star Wars.
Yeah, definitely. It had a lot of character interaction, had a lot of great chemistry, a lot of great everything. You know something I've always loved about this movie, though?
What?
Even after we see Benny do these awful things, he's kind of an awful character.
He is.
Well, not an awful character. He's a great character. He's an awful person.
Yeah.
He literally sold his soul to the devil.
Yes. Just to, and he even said the line, it's like, it's better to serve next to him than be a slave to him.
But even at the end, Brendan Fraser still tries to rescue him.
Yes. And says with remorsefulness, goodbye, Benny.
Yeah, like he's actually sad it happened.
Yeah, well, I mean, after all this stuff, it's like, I kind of grown a task. He's kind of that pest of mine that I don't like that much, but I don't know, I haven't been in that situation before, but...
Interesting thing about the end of this movie, though. Something else that kind of bothers me.
Okay.
Another plot hole. Where did those camels come from?
Oh, in the movie?
Yeah, well, the camels they ride away on, those camels shouldn't have been there.
That's interesting. That's a good point.
Because
wait.
Benny and the mummy flew in on a sand tornado.
Yeah.
And Brendan Fraser flew in
On a plane.
That
is interesting. I didn't think about that.
The other night when I watched it again for the first time in a while, I was like, wait, where did those camels actually come from?
That's an interesting thought. I did not know. I don't know that.
There's actually one aspect of this movie we haven't talked about. What did you think of the tribe of people meant to protect the city?
I find it funny how at the beginning of the film they killed everybody who was there except for Ben Fraser, and the leader's like, let him go, the desert's gonna kill him. And then when Ben Fraser comes back in the same spot, they're standing in the same spot, so I'm like, you've been waiting there for 3 years just to see the guy comes back? That's funny. I know he didn't. I know that they didn't do that, but that's funny.
But I've also found it interesting the way they start attacking the boat. Because they're kind of good characters, they serve a good purpose, so they just start murdering everybody.
Like, well, yeah, wow. Well, why not just explain it? I mean,
that's what I was thinking.
I mean, they did it later on when the plagues were falling. They explained it had been in Fraser's character. It's like, oh, well, you released this monster. Well, why didn't you tell us this at the beginning?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, why did you just kill them? I mean, you killed all these people over here. Couldn't it be better just to tell us? I mean,
yeah, I was.
It's like Superman for Batman for Superman. Just tell Batman what's going on, so you don't have to fight one another.
Yeah, sometimes characters do stupid things.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what determines a good movie versus a bad movie. Because every movie has flaws, except maybe Citizen Kane and maybe Vertigo. I have a hard time finding flaws in those films, but almost all movies have flaws. A good movie is just a movie where you can ignore the flaws. A bad movie is one where the flaws just become so glaringly obvious that you want to flip tables and scream at the screen.
Oh, hi, doggy.
The Room, Suicide Squad is probably the most recent one I can think of where I just wanted to throw things at the screen.
What's another one? It's like they were the gods of Egypt.
I didn't actually see it.
Oh, you also saw, what is it? You saw Resident Evil 7.
I enjoyed that. I don't care. Shut up.
Oh, you enjoy? Oh, one of those guilty pleasure movies. I see.
It's totally a guilty pleasure movie.
Yeah, we definitely need to do one of those guilty pleasure episodes.
We have a schedule worked out now, but maybe we can get to the point. I just don't know what to talk about with the Resident Evil movies because they're so bad. They're so stupid. Like the other movies where you turn your brain off, and I kind of use that as an insult because the action doesn't make any sense. The plot just what?
Yeah, I feel the same way about Star Trek 5. That's my guilty pleasure movie. But I think we covered almost everything about this movie.
I think we did too. There is one thing we didn't cover.
Okay.
Think about it. The effects.
Yeah.
I was watching this the other night, and I was like, wow. The effects actually hold up surprisingly well to be 18 years old.
That's true. I mean, so some parts were like, yeah, that's bad. But for the most part, yeah.
The Beatles didn't look great, but the sand face thing, that still looked cool.
Yeah, it did. And I do like that scene. We've seen how we're on it. That Ben Fraser's character meets an old friend who was a WW1 vet. And his entire thing was, he's been in retirement and he's just hanging out. And he's like, well, I want to die doing something glorious, And so Ben Fraser gets him and tells him that we're going to do this and you're not going to be able to get paid, but, we're going to save the world and stuff. And he's like, by golly, I'm going to do it. And he had a good time, and the plane crashed, and he died with a smile on his face.
He literally died with a smile on his face in this movie. He died happy.
Yeah, and that's what he wanted. As a soldier, it's like he wanted to go out in a blaze of glory, and he did, and he was happy because of it. That's all he wanted. Like he wanted to end his life on a high note. And I thought, that's another thing I like about this movie. It's touches like that. But anyway, yeah, there's a lot of things we talked about, but unfortunately, we just ran out of time.
We did.
But before we go, tell our audience what we have on store next week, actually.
Next week is going to be a movie that a lot of people hate. Mm-hmm. But Joseph and I have always loved this film.
I don't understand the hate for this film. I really don't. I've always enjoyed it. I think it's better than most people give it credit for, and we're going to discuss it on why.
And I know you're wondering the film we're talking about. Since we're talking about this, we're talking about a film called Speed Racer.
Go Speed Racer. Copyrights. We don't get paid. Go Speed Racer. Go.
But yeah, a lot of people hate this film, but yet Joseph and I love it. Mm-hmm. So we're going to tell you why.
Yeah, and I watched this in theater when it came out, and I'm like, this wasn't half bad, actually. But no, this is going to happen next week. So, tune in next week. But before we go, is there any shout-outs you want? Actually,
there is a podcast I listened to recently.
Okay.
Since we create podcasts, I listen to a lot of them. It's called the Omitted Podcast.
Okay.
It does an interesting job talking about some lesser-known facets of history.
Ooh.
Like, there was a Pearl Harbor episode they did recently called Neo How. There's actually a movie coming about the story, but it's so well produced. Mm-hmm. It's such a good podcast. It's just really well done. Because I love history podcasts.
Okay, cool. So I'll have to check that out. But in the meantime, we gotta go.
We do.
As always, I'm Joseph Collins.
And I'm Paul Combs.
And you've been listening to the CNC Geekcast.